Hey there Internet, I am the PCGoblin, and in a previous video or another video I tried to upgrade this Mac Mini. Crap's falling out of it. I tried to upgrade it with 8 gigs of RAM and an SSD to try and see what kind of performance I'd get, but somewhere in the mix when I was trying to redo the thermal paste on one of the heat sinks, I knocked off a little piece on the logic board and, well, needless to say, it really doesn't work anymore. That you saw in the other video, or you will see in the other video. So, I got this newer 2010 Mac Mini. It's basically the same guts. It's a 2.4 gigahertz Intel Core 2 Duo processor with very little RAM, a slow 5400 RPM, the SATA drive. So I'm going to be taking this apart, shoving the stuff inside of it to see what kind of performance we get, and hopefully it's a whole lot better. So we're going to start out and see just how long it takes for this thing to boot and compare it to how fast it is with the SSD. Then we'll run a benchmark or two when it's actually booted to see what kind of improvement we get out of the SSD and the increased memory, because right now it's got 2 gigs of memory inside of it, and like I said, that 500 gigs 5400 RPM drive, so the SSD is going to be a big boost. So time to start the test to see how long it takes. Gotta get my little stopwatch. And stop. Okay, so about 2 minutes, 28 seconds for it to get to the desktop. I'm not sure if it was through loading the desktop or not, but it looked like it was. And then 3 minutes and 4 seconds until it could actually load up Safari with the desktop fully loaded, etc. So it shouldn't be too hard for the SSD to beat those. Here's the stats. This is Geekbench 4. I also want to add that this is a complete fresh install of macOS 10.13.6. Like, I just barely installed it. I wiped the hard drive, installed it. Nothing's been done to it. All I've done is just let it sit to make sure any indexing or anything the system has to do is done. So everything's running as fast as this possibly can. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Run CPU Benchmark. It's finally done. Early 2010 Mac Mini, like I stated, single core performance is 1617, multi-core is 2755, memory score is 1674, floating point score is 1350, integer score 1939, crypto 96, multi-core memory 1690, 2533 for floating point. So now we've got the baseline. I'm going to go ahead and actually just swap out the memory, retest it to see what just upgrading to 8 gigs of memory does for performance, and then I'll swap out the SSD to see what that does for our performance. I'm going to save this and we'll be right back. Alright, so I now have 8 gigs of memory installed, or 8 gigs of RAM installed, and I haven't done anything else. The SSD is not in there, it's just the same setup, so I'm going to be timing it again. So, ready, set, go! Got off like a minute of time. Wow! I didn't think RAM would help it boot faster, but it did by almost a minute. Got Geekbench up running again, testing with 8 gigs, nothing else has changed, running CPU benchmark. So this is the moment of truth. The SSD is in, the 8 gigs of RAM is in, OS X has been reinstalled, it's been booted into it, so this is going to be the first boot since OS X has been installed. Let's see how fast it goes. Wow! So roughly 45 seconds to boot into it. I didn't have automatic login turned on, so that slowed us down a little bit. But just to get to where Safari was usable, it was like 56 seconds. Okay, we have Geekbench reinstalled. It's now running the CPU benchmark, and we'll compare this to our previous results to see what kind of score we get now that we have an SSD and 8 gigs of memory inside. So we've got SSD 8 gigs, regular hard drive 8 gigs, regular hard drive 2 gigs. So we can see an overall increase across single core performance, overall increase across multi-core score performance, and dropping down to single core. So memory score with 2 gigs, 1674, 1704 with 8 gigs, 1700 with the SSD and 8 gigs. So not a huge change there. Alright, multi-core performance with memory, it was 1690 with 2 gigs, 1714 with 8 gigs, 1722 with SSD and 8 gigs. So, gradual increases across performance across the board. So not bad. Not bad at all. Why did I do this? The reason I did this is this computer is for a lady who's trying to get things up and going in her life, and she needs a computer that's somewhat good. So my dad and I, we got this computer, we got the SSD, we got the RAM to install it in this, so they actually have a computer to access the internet and help them with their school things and, you know, progress their learning. I was really curious about how 8 gigs of RAM and an SSD would change the performance of this machine. It's an old machine, so I didn't know if it would actually take advantage of both things very well, but it really has. With 2 gigs of RAM installed in the system with the regular hard drive, it was low. I mean, you could see it on the boot time. It took 3 minutes for it to boot and become somewhat usable, but even then, anything you do, it just had to sit there and spin and think about it and blah, blah, blah. It just took forever. Once we put in the 8 gigs, we increased the boot time, the response time, everything just worked a little bit better, but once we got the SSD in with the 8 gigs, wow! I mean, it actually responds and works like a modern computer. I mean, it's not the fastest machine. It takes a little bit longer to do things, but it works. It's very usable. It's very good. I'm really impressed with this. To pull all the costs together, it was, I think, 65 bucks for the SSD, 40 or 50 bucks for the RAM, and then the computer itself was $120 used off of eBay, so roughly, let's see, what was that? So roughly about $210 for this machine. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad deal. It's a pretty good machine for $210. You'd be hard pressed to find something better, I think. Now, I'm kind of taking PCs out of the market. I mean, because this little Mac Mini is small, it doesn't use any power, it takes up very little space, so overall, I think it's a pretty good deal. I really think this is going to serve the new owner really well and her kids. I'm really excited to get it to them. Well, that's it for this video. I'd really love to hear what you guys think about this. I know I didn't show me actually tearing out the memory and whatnot to install it, but it's really simple, and I'm sure there's a million other videos for how to do that. At least anything, there's the iFixit guide that'll show that, but I'd really like to know what you guys think about this, so let me know in the comments below. I had a lot of fun working on this Mac, getting it up to shape and get it to actually run like a computer should nowadays. But I'd really like to know what you guys think about the performance gains in the comments below. If you want to see more of my stuff, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit that like button. And I'll see you next time, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Clock. Stopwatch. So, oops, reset. All right, so starting now. Yep. Right. Okay, starting now.